are talking Mother May I, a psychological horror written and directed by Lawrence Vanicelli. And this one stars Kyle Gallner and Holland Roden, who you may know from the TV show Teen Wolf. And this is an interesting kind of psychological, with a supernatural kind of twist to a degree. It focuses on this couple, Ava and Emmett, who we see kind of moving into the old house that used to belong to Emmett's mother, who has recently passed away. Now we learn that Emmett and his mother are somewhat estranged. He feels the sense of abandonment by her, but he's been left this kind of large house, which is like a converted barn. And his girlfriend Ava and him kind of travel to this house to kind of like sort out the affairs. Now Ava's mother is a kind of psychiatrist or some type of psychologist, something along the lines of that. So she has a kind of an affinity with kind of psychoanalyzing because she's kind of obviously been influenced by her mother. And whilst at this house, they, you know, do a few kind of mushrooms and, you know, have a good time and stuff. But afterwards, Ava seems to be acting a little strange. Now, when I say strange, she seems to be acting a lot like Emmett's mother. For example, she starts kind of smoking, she starts wearing her clothes, doing her makeup, sounding like her, even becoming a strong swimmer when before she couldn't swim at all. And it could be the fact that maybe she's possessed by the mother of Emmett and the deceased mother of Emmett, or is she kind of playing some type of psychological game? It's certainly a deep Freudian psychological horror with kind of supernatural undertones. So let's talk about what works. Now I will say right from the bat, this is a psychological, slow-based, character-driven movie. This is not a kind of a, say, possession-style movie where you're going to see a lot of VFX on screen. In fact, there's precious little kind of like overt horror elements here, but the psychological kind of side of stuff is quite well realised on screen, I have to say. You really do feel the inner turmoil that is kind of perpetrated by people involved in this movie seeping through, you know, when you're watching this film. I think it's very well handled. Certainly gives you a kind of a little bit of a warped perspective on things, you might say. Now this is somewhat of an art house film. You know, not maybe a full-on kind of art house, but there's certainly art house sensibilities here. But I've got to say, on the plus side, you know, it's very well kind of like photographed and kind of put together on a kind of an artistic level. The movie is mostly taking place within the kind of the confines of this kind of large house, but the director finds ways to kind of make it look interesting, if that makes sense, using kind of like, you know, forced perspective close-ups, you know, kind of looking at the kind of the bugs that kind of are kind of all around this house and kind of making it have this kind of like this ominous feel to it. But it's, you know, it's certainly well photographed and has this kind of artistic kind of edge to it. But for me, the real kind of star of the show, so to speak, I've got to be honest with you, is the acting. Particularly from our female lead, the character of Ava. The actress who plays her, I think, does an absolutely outstanding job, because she's really playing sort of two characters. She's playing Ava as, you know, herself, and then we have Ava as Emmett's mother, if that makes sense. And the contrast is quite stark. And even when she's kind of playing like the kind of the mother character, I mean, it's so different. It's transformative. So it really is an acting tour de force from, you know, an actress who primarily was known for, you know, a CW supernatural drama. But that's not to take anything away from any of the other actors. I think they all do a great job. But obviously this is the kind of the meaty role. This is the one which has the vast array of kind of acting choices. But, you know, absolutely hats off to the kind of the acting here. I can't fault it really. I thought it was Very, very, very strong. Now, despite this not being a overt horror film as such, there still is some creepy moments, and this is underscored by a great kind of like orchestral soundtrack, and just some kind of like good atmosphere building. You know, we kind of get the sense that there's this presence there, and this is partly down to the kind of the way the movie's filmed and where it's kind of like the slow burn kind of feel to it, and obviously underscored by the kind of the music involved as well. And it has this kind of like this creepy, ominous feel all throughout the movie, where you just feel, you know, something is watching, you know, from the walls and things like this. And we see all the kind of the paraphernalia and that the mother has left behind. She seems to be a little bit of a kind of a hoarder and things, and it just feels her like presence is kind of seeping out the walls, so to speak. So I thought that was all very kind of well done. And if you like a movie that kind of will take you on a little bit of a journey in regards to what you think is kind of going on, again, this is one I could probably recommend. What doesn't work for me, I have to say, I found this movie a little confusing after a while. I mean, I was kind of along for the ride until around the halfway mark. And I got to be honest with you, then I started to kind of get a little bit confused with what was actually kind of going on. I think sometimes when you do a kind of like an art house kind of movie, it can end up being a little surreal, a little kind of like, you know, open to interpretation. And I think that's maybe what's kind of going on here. But I have to say, you know, I was following the narrative to a point. And then I was thinking, I'm not entirely sure what is meant to be happening at this kind of time during the narrative. I mean, you know, it's not as if I don't watch a lot of films. You know, I see many films where I can kind of follow sort of complex storylines, and this is very much as I say, a character-based story. So it's not as if we're going to lots of locations and, you know, there's many characters. It's just kind of like, you know, mainly two characters. We get a kind of a third character who comes in and for a little bit of support, but I found this as a kind of like, I'm not really quite sure what I'm supposed to be feeling now. I don't know if that was necessarily a conscious choice or whether it was just to happen where the narrative started to kind of lose me a little bit. And when it did do that, then I found the movie starting to become a little dull, to be honest, because it wasn't really taking me on that journey, so to speak. So I found myself becoming a little kind of detached from it, and I think some people might find the movie its kind of reluctance to really show you one way or another what's kind of happening, if that makes sense. It very much is open for interpretation to a point, and I feel that this movie presents kind of different options to what could be happening. And when I was watching this, I bet this is going to be one of these movies that is really not definitive in what it's kind of doing. Now, it kind of is, if we kind of look at the very kind of like finale of the movie. I suggest it does maybe kind of give you a definitive answer to a point, but it's not 100% definitive, I would say. But I have to say, I think maybe it might be a little frustrating, to be honest. I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more setup. To be honest with you, we very much told lots of things rather than kind of seeing it. You know, we never really see the actual kind of the mother really outside of a kind of watching a few kind of VHS tapes that they kind of find in the actual house and stuff like that. I don't know. To me, I felt like it was a little bit of tell don't show to a certain degree. But you know, those elements aside, like I said, the story wise, it's a very slow burn movie, deliberately so. That's going to be a taste thing. You know, that's the movie it's trying to be. It's not going to be for everyone if you like it kind of like necessarily certainly a more adrenaline filled film, but it's such a well acted film, such a visually interesting film. Even though I wasn't quite on board narratively quite as much, I have to say I feel this movie is so strong in other areas. It does carry on through and make it still a very kind of compelling film in many ways. I think the narrative could have been stronger. I think it kind of dips in the kind of like the middle of the film, maybe towards the beginning of the third act. But it still is, you know, if you like a character-based movie, I would suggest checking it out with some very strong performances. I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. I do think it's a strong film. But if you want a very clear narrative, if you want a fast-paced narrative, then I'd maybe think twice maybe about this one. 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.